Welcome to the Red Sneaker Podcast, your guide to success in the worlds of writing and publishing. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Red Sneaker Writers Center, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. This is episode 26, going out on August 26, 2019, the weekend before WriterCon, our annual writers conference in Oklahoma City over Labor Day weekend. This podcast is for Red Sneaker writers, people who are serious about writing and want some practical knowledge to help them do it. My guest interview for this podcast episode is with Erin Hennicke, who is a movie TV book scout at the firm Franklin Siegal. In the past, she's worked in traditional book publishing, and she's also, for several years, she was at Barwood, Barbra Streisand's production company. Now she's full-time looking for books, stories that can be turned into successful movie and TV projects, and she's good at it. She's been on the podcast before, and she's presenting at WriterCon, taking pitches from people who think they've got a story that's right for the movies. She's got some thoughts on how to make your story more appealing to Hollywood, and we will get into all that, I promise. But first, the news. There are a lot of interesting developments in the book and publishing worlds, so I'm going to start with some quick cuts. First, Barnes & Noble has reported that they've seen a 31% jump in sales of romance books over the past year. Now, romance has always been highly popular. It is usually considered to be the best-selling of all the popular fiction genres. But 31% over the past 12 months? What on earth is going on? Apparently, people are looking for romance more than ever. What I thought was particularly interesting was how they broke it down state by state and how much it varies from state to state. Alaska, for instance, has seen a 17.1% jump in book sales, but others have seen less. And only in 4 states, and one of them is Oklahoma, I don't know what to make of that, but only in 4 states are romance book sales actually decreasing. Some of this, to be fair, depends upon what you consider a romance novel. They list some of them on their list, for instance, The Wedding Party, a book that was a Reese Witherspoon Book Club selection. More on that later. But some people might call it women's fiction, which then brings into question, well, what's the difference between romance and women's fiction? I mean, there clearly is sometimes a difference, but how do you decide what category to put the book in? At any rate, this is an interesting development. Similarly, over at Harper Collins, they've announced that they're launching a new imprint, Harper Horizons, which is a nonfiction imprint that's going to publish memoir, biographies, autobiographies, motivational, self-help books, and general lifestyle topics. They say that they're looking for books that embrace values like integrity, optimism, family values, sacrifice, creativity, hard work, wisdom, and inspiration. So, if you've got a book that might fit under that rubric, well, you just got a new market. Audible, of course, is the largest seller of audiobooks, and they are a division of Amazon. We've talked in the past about how they are now doing Audible originals, that is, books that start or only exist as audiobooks. And they've just taken an even deeper dive, a greater expansion into the originals. They've announced a multi-year development deal with Skybound Entertainment to create more of these audio-only originals. If that name, Skybound, sounds familiar to it, it may be because you're familiar with a little show they do called The Walking Dead. I'm kidding. It's not a little show. It's a global hit. And now they're going to expand, probably use that, but also expand beyond that to create more original audiobooks. In the world of Facebooks, there are big changes to Facebook ads coming soon. And as you may be aware, Facebook ads are generally considered an important component of any book marketing campaign. Probably Amazon ads is at the very top of the pyramid, but Facebook ads can be used very well and profitably also. They're rolling out a new feature called campaign budget optimization. You may have already seen some hints of it on your web page or your Facebook page if you're using Facebook ads. It's supposed to allow you to basically pick a budget. What do you want to spend for a campaign? And then turn it all over to Facebook's friendly neighborhood AI, which will determine for you how that money should be spent. Well, if you're not really into marketing, or if all of these concepts and keywords baffle you, that might be reassuring, assuming that you trust Facebook more than some people do right now. This is a complicated subject, and I'm telling you, the guru on book marketing is David Gaughran, who has been on this podcast before for just that reason. He's a presenter at WriterCon this year for exactly that reason, because no one knows more about this than he does. And he has some very interesting takes on this subject. So if you're interested in the changes coming to Facebook ads, I very much recommend that you go to his blog, which you can find by Googling, or I will put the website address in the show notes. A moment ago, I mentioned the Reese Witherspoon Book Club, and I want to talk a minute about just how influential that's become. I mentioned it on the last podcast when I talked about the book Where the Crawdads Sing, which has become a #1 New York Times bestseller, buoyed up, at least in part, by being selected by Reese's Book Club. Some of you will remember when Oprah was queen of daytime television, and for the last 15 years or so of that program, she had Oprah's Book Club, which regularly recommended books, which all saw powerhouse sales spikes as soon as they got the nod from Oprah. Well, since she ended the book club, various people have started book clubs and book lists and recommendations. Jenna Bush Hager for one, and Barack Obama for another. But the one that seems to have emerged as having the most marketplace clout is Reese's Book Club, which is kind of interesting because, according to her, this all began as an offshoot of her media production company, which is called Hello Sunshine. Witherspoon has said that she was disappointed in the kind of scripts that she was getting. They weren't the stories she wanted to tell. They weren't interesting and innovative. She wanted to tell different stories about women created for women. And that's the mission statement, if you will, for her company, Hello Sunshine. It, quote, celebrates women and puts them at the center of the story, end quote. Well, as you might have guessed, the book club does exactly that. According to Lauren Neustadter, who is the company's head of film and television, quote, so much of what we do is book-driven, that they have conversations with publishers about what they're looking for, and now they're actually looking themselves for books that might be just right. First, of course, they recommend them on the book club and see what happens then, and then maybe focus on trying to come up with some kind of film or TV project. And they've been very successful with that. They've got about a dozen projects in development, one place or another, right now. Now, obviously, not everybody listening to this podcast is writing books about women for women, but if you are, by all means, you need to think about submitting to or urging your publisher to see if they can get your book in front of Reese Witherspoon's people. There was a big article a few days ago in the New York Times about piracy in the book world, fake and pirated and tampered with editions of books, some of them very famous. The article singles out Amazon. The headline is, "In Amazon's bookstore, Orwell gets a rewrite." But let's be real about it. It's not just at Amazon, it's everywhere. Amazon may have more of those because Amazon sells more of everything. But the problem is across the book world, and just possibly this tendency of the times to always kind of demonize Amazon is not the best way to a solution. What they're concerned about is people basically taking work that is not theirs and publishing it as theirs, or publishing work that's still under copyright protection somewhere without permission of the copyright owners, or in some cases changing it or very badly translating it into another language, so much that the original text is altered, if not altogether lost. In one case mentioned in the article, for instance, there are inaccurate editions of George Orwell's classic 1984 coming out of India. A lot of this piracy seems to stem from India. Why India? Because their copyright laws are far less extensive than they are in the United States. So a lot of books that will still remain protected, not in the public domain in the United States for a long time, are already in the public domain in India. So they can perhaps be legally published there and uploaded to the Indian version of Amazon, from which, of course, you can buy it anywhere, and that's a problem. To their credit, Amazon will take down any books once they're notified that they are pirated editions. But what we really want is some kind of agency that prevents it from happening or shuts it down quickly. As I said, I don't think the solution is necessarily to criticize, the company that sells some of them, but instead look for some kind of watchdog agency, somebody who's got their eye on this, somebody who can quickly process and investigate complaints and to notify not just one retailer, but all retailers when an invalid book has been published. Whether the Times likes it or not, self-publishing, non-traditional publishing, publishing outside New York City is here to stay. So instead of picking on one company versus others, we need to find global solutions. This is an important issue because authors work hard for their money and they have rights. They have the right to be protected from piracy. I talked on a previous podcast about Nora Roberts and the lawsuit she's instigated, saying that she has the means to fight that other people don't, and that's why she's filed this lawsuit overseas against somebody who's copywriting her work and many other people's works. That's what we need more of, people who stand up, swing the bat, and hit one over the fences, protecting the rights of authors. In this writing tips segment, I want to focus on an article that came out this month from The Atlantic magazine. It's also available online, titled The Amazon Publishing Juggernaut. Yes, once again, we're going to be talking about Amazon, which really shouldn't surprise you at this point since Amazon is the largest bookseller by far in the United States, largest retailer of everything. More than 50% of all books are sold at Amazon. But this article is focusing not so much on Amazon the retailer as Amazon the publisher, which may be more significant than you've realized. We've talked, for instance, a couple times now about Where the Crawdads Sing, a hugely successful book that, as I speak, is number 1 on the New York Times bestselling list. But have you heard about Loreth Ann White's The Dark Bones, or Claire McGowan's What You Did, or a book by Julianne McLean called Fire Sparkling? Possibly not, because they haven't received as much media attention. But in fact, every one of those books I just mentioned is selling more copies than Where the Crawdads Sang at Amazon. They're all Amazon publishing titles, and consequently, not solely because of that, but they are selling very well. What's the disadvantage of publishing at Amazon? Well, you'll never be at Barnes & Noble, and you probably won't be on old school bestseller lists like the New York Times is. But you do have a close relationship with America's largest retailer, which may be advantageous, especially if your primary goal is to get your book in the hands of readers. For the uninitiated, Amazon Publishing now has 16 different imprints. They literally publish just about every kind of book there is to publish, and they're publishing a lot of it, a lot of titles. They're not publishing quite as many as some of the big 5 publishers at this time, but they are getting close, and I would be willing to bet they'll be there in another year or two. What's